Get off my lake now, or I am calling the cops. That is how it started, the day peace died on my shoreline. The HOA president, this unhinged woman I had never seen before, was screaming from the edge of my own deck like she was defending sacred ground. She had that sharp, nasal voice that cuts straight through the morning air, the kind that makes your coffee go bitter, and I swear to you, she was standing on my property, yelling at me to leave it. At first, I laughed, thought it was some misunderstanding. Maybe she had the wrong cabin. Maybe she had one too many cups of HOA brand coffee. But then she kept shouting, veins showing, eyes blazing, and when she actually pulled out her phone and started dialing 911, I realized this was not a misunderstanding. This was war. The cop showed up 20 minutes later, looking half asleep and fully confused. He glanced between us, me holding a fishing rod, her waving papers like she was staging a revolution. The poor guy is, face said everything, who calls the police on someone standing on their own dock. He left, shaking his head. And that is when I knew I was dealing with someone beyond reason. But what I did not know, what I could not have imagined, was that this screaming HOA president was sitting on top of the biggest mistake of her life. And that mistake was me. Let me rewind for a second. My name is Marcus Thompson. I am 45, recently retired after 2 decades as a corporate lawyer. I had spent half my life arguing with people in suits about things that did not matter. Contracts, clauses, mergers, all words, all noise. When I finally cashed out, I told myself I had earned peace. A cabin by the lake. Just me, nature, and a fishing line between us. I found the place through an estate sale, cheap, a little run down, but solid. Pine walls, old dock, creaky steps. It had that smell of rain-soaked wood and history. Perfect. The lake sat still like glass, surrounded by tall oaks, and the kind of silence you can feel in your bones. I thought I had finally escaped the world. Turns out, I had just bought front row seats to the craziest HOA circus you could imagine. The first morning was perfect. I woke up early, brewed coffee, and sat on the dock as the sunrise bled orange across the water. The air smelled like pine and wet earth. For a second, I forgot deadlines, clients, everything. I remember whispering to myself, "This is it, Marcus. This is what peace feels like." I had barely taken my first sip when I heard it, the crunch of gravel under fast tires. Then the snarl of an engine climbing my private road. Whoever it was, they were driving like they owned the place. A white BMW skidded to a stop in a cloud of dust. The door flew open and out stepped trouble in human form. Blonde bob haircut, designer clothes, sunglasses that cost more than my fishing gear. You could smell entitlement before she even opened her mouth. "Excuse me," she barked, marching down toward the dock. "This is a private community lake. You cannot fish here." I blinked, still holding my coffee. "Morning to you too," I said. "I am just fishing off my property." She frowned like I had spoken another language. "No, you are trespassing. This entire lake belongs to the Homeowners Association, and I am the president." "President," I repeated, like she had just announced she was queen of the water. "Good for you. But this here, this dock, this land, is mine." That is when she lost it. "I am Victoria Hayes," she shouted, jabbing a finger at me, "and I control all lake access. You are violating community regulations." Community regulations. She said it like she was quoting the 10 Commandments. Now, I have dealt with irrational people before, clients, executives, even opposing lawyers who thought screaming made them right, but this woman was something else. She started filming me with her phone, narrating like she was hosting a true crime show. Subject refuses to comply. Ongoing trespass. Evidence collected for legal action. I stood there in my fishing boots, trying not to laugh. "Ma'am, are you seriously filming me on my own property?" she sniffed. "You will thank me when the fines arrive. You are destroying our property values." That line, property values, was her battle cry. Like every breath she took was somehow tied to Zillow. I sighed, reeled in my line, and said calmly, "Look, I bought this place fair and square. You can check the deed. It is public record." Her eyes narrowed. "We will see about that." Then she did the unthinkable. She actually called the cops. When the officer showed up, he looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Victoria rushed up to him, waving papers and pointing at me. He is trespassing on community property. He is violating HOA Rule 17, no unauthorized fishing. The officer raised an eyebrow. Rule 17. I handed him my deed and license. I am Marcus Thompson. This is my cabin, and that is my dock. She is mistaken. He glanced over the documents, then sighed. "Ma'am, this appears to be his property. This sounds like a civil matter, not a criminal one." Victoria's face turned the color of a stop sign. "This is unacceptable," she shrieked. "You have to arrest him." The officer gave her a polite smile that said, "Ma'am, please stop talking," and drove away. I watched his cruiser disappear down the road, and for a moment there was blessed silence. Then Victoria glared at me like I had personally offended God. "This is not over," she hissed. "Oh, I am counting on that," I muttered under my breath. After she stormed off, I went back inside the cabin, still shaking my head. I thought that was the end of it. I had no idea she was just getting started. While cleaning out a closet later that day, I found an old wooden trunk the previous owner had left behind. Inside were faded photographs, letters, and one old envelope with the words Thompson Property scrawled across the front, my last name. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a brittle piece of parchment, a hand-drawn map, yellowed with age. Most of it was hard to read, but in the center, I could clearly make out a lake. My lake, and around it, acres upon acres marked with the same family name, Thompson. I froze. Could it be... I knew my great-great-grandfather had lived somewhere in this region, but the idea that this land could be tied to my family history never crossed my mind. Still, I filed it away in my brain as an interesting coincidence. At that point, I was more concerned about the lunatic with a smartphone who thought she owned the lake. The next morning, I woke up to find something taped to my door, a bright orange envelope marked HOA notice. Inside was a cease and desist order, accusing me of illegal fishing activity and demanding a $50,000 fine. $50,000. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. The audacity was almost impressive. But before I could even process it, my neighbor Gary showed up looking pale. "Marcus," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, "you need to know what is going on." Victoria has been telling people she owns the lake. She is saying she is negotiating with developers to make this a private resort area. Developers? I frowned. She is not the owner. Gary nodded miserably. That is what I told her. She said she controls the rights. My gut twisted. Control. Rights. Those are dangerous words when spoken by the wrong person. I looked back toward the lake. The morning light was turning the water gold again, but it did not feel peaceful anymore. It felt watched. 2 days later, I got another letter, this time a notice for an emergency HOA meeting. Supposedly, it was about preserving community integrity, which, translated from HOA speak, meant, "We are coming for your dock." I decided to go. I wanted to see what kind of circus this would be. The meeting was held in a bland little room at the community center. Fluorescent lights, folding chairs, the smell of stale coffee and cheap perfume. 8 people sat in a semicircle like they were about to conduct a seance. Victoria stood at the front with a projector screen, her hair perfectly styled, her smile perfectly fake. The title slide read, "Unauthorized Lake Activities, Threat Assessment." I kid you not. She had photos of me fishing, taken from across the water like I was some kind of criminal. She narrated each one like it was evidence in a trial. "This man," she said, clicking to the next slide, "has repeatedly violated community policy by accessing restricted lake areas without permission." Someone in the back mumbled, "Is not that his dock?" Victoria glared daggers. "That is irrelevant." I sat quietly, arms crossed, just watching her build her fantasy. When she called for a vote to restrict lake access for non-compliant residents, 6 hands went up. Out of 8, that is a majority, she announced triumphantly. Motion passed. I leaned forward. You do not even have quorum, I said evenly. Your own bylaws require at least 25 votes for any official action. Her smile faltered. We are operating under emergency provisions. Emergency, I repeated, because I went fishing. The room went silent. That night, I could not sleep. I sat by the window, staring at the lake. That old map still burned into my thoughts. Something about this did not add up. Her obsession, her certainty, her fake authority, it all pointed to something bigger. Around 2 in the morning, I pulled up the county property records online. Line after line of tax documents, boundary files, deed histories. And there, buried deep, was a familiar name, Thompson, my name. I was not sure what it meant yet, but I knew one thing for certain. This was not over. And as the wind rippled across the lake, I whispered to myself, "All right, Victoria, you picked the wrong lawyer to mess with." When you have spent 20 years in corporate law, you learn to recognize a lie the way a doctor recognizes a heartbeat. The rhythm gives it away, the forced calm, the fake certainty, the way someone repeats the same line over and over, like saying it enough times might make it true. That is exactly what Victoria Hayes was doing. After the so-called emergency HOA meeting, I could not shake it off. 8 people, no quorum, no legality whatsoever. Yet Victoria acted like she had just passed a federal law. I sat in my cabin that night, staring at those fake documents taped to my door, each one threatening legal consequences. I should have laughed it off, but something in my gut told me it was deeper than petty HOA politics. Then Gary came by the next day, same nervous expression, same hunched shoulders. He looked like he had not slept in days. He hesitated before speaking, like his conscience was physically holding him back. "Marcus," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something, but please do not hate me." That is never a good way to start a sentence. I motioned him inside. "What is going on?" He rubbed his hands together, his voice trembling. "Victoria offered me $5,000 to testify against you. She wants me to say you have been breaking HOA rules, hurting property values, scaring off buyers. She says it is for the good of the community." I stared at him, my jaw tight. "Did you take it?" His face crumpled. "No, but I wanted to. My wife's chemo is killing us financially. I did not know what else to do." For a moment, I did not know what to say. Anger burned behind my ribs, not at him, but at her. The way she preyed on weakness, how she weaponized desperation. "Gary, listen to me," I said finally. "You do not need to apologize. You are not the enemy here." He looked up, guilt and relief mixing on his face. "You really think she is scamming people, do you not?" "I do not think," I said. "I know. That conversation changed everything. It was not just an annoying neighbor anymore, it was a full-blown con operation. Over the next few days, the harassment campaign kicked into high gear. Fake violation letters, photos of me trespassing circulated on the HOA Facebook group. Rumors spread like wildfire. Marcus does not really own his cabin. Marcus is under investigation. Marcus is dangerous. I had fought billion-dollar corporations with fewer dirty tricks. Then came the so-called security patrol. 2 men in black polos, no badges, no official ID, walking around the lake like they were guarding Fort Knox. One of them approached me as I was carrying groceries. "Sir," he said flatly, "the HOA has suspended all lake access. You will need to stop fishing until you receive authorization." I stared at him, stunned. Authorization? From who? He hesitated. "Miss Hayes." I almost laughed. "You are telling me the HOA president hired you to guard a lake she does not even own." He frowned. "Sir, I am just doing my job." "Yeah," I said, pushing past him, "and I am just about to do mine." Because at that moment, my lawyer instincts were fully awake. That night, I dug through my old files, legal databases, property law manuals, the whole arsenal. I pulled up the HOA's charter documents online, and, surprise, surprise, half of it was outdated or flat out invalid. The so-called emergency meeting she had held, completely illegal. The votes, meaningless without quorum. The fines, not enforceable without due process. But then I found something else. Something that stopped me cold. The HOA bylaws never actually granted authority over the lake. Not once. It was not community property at all. The legal boundary line ended before the shoreline, which meant every rule, every claim, every fine Victoria had been throwing around was built on nothing but air. And yet, she was still acting like a queen, enforcing royal decrees. That is when I realized this was not about property management, it was about power. She needed control, even if she had to invent it. I started documenting everything, every notice, every interaction, every email. I even bought a small body camera to record my conversations with her security patrol. If she wanted to play lawyer, I would show her what a real one looked like. But somewhere between the screenshots and evidence logs, I remembered the old letter I had found, the Thompson property map. Something about it had been gnawing at me ever since the confrontation, so I went back to it. Under the faded ink, there was a signature, Nathaniel Thompson, 1847. My great-great-grandfather. I stared at the name for a long time, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. If that document was real, if it had any legal standing left, it could change everything. So I did what any obsessive ex-lawyer would do. I started digging. The county archives were not digitized past the 1900s, so I had to go old school. Dust, microfilm, the whole deal. For 3 days straight, I sat in a dimly lit records room, flipping through ledgers older than the light bulbs above me. And then, buried between tax maps and inheritance filings, I found it, Thompson, Nathaniel, 800 acres, including lakeside parcel and water rights. I actually laughed out loud. 800 acres. The number looked absurd, written in that neat cursive script. I thought, no way. There is no chance that deed survived intact. But then, another thought crept in. What if it did? If my family's original claim had never been legally subdivided, if the boundaries were never properly refiled, then every inch of this community, every dock, every cabin, even Victoria's pristine house, might technically still sit on Thompson land, my land. The idea felt surreal. I was not rich. I was not special. I had just wanted to fish. And now, I might accidentally own an entire neighborhood. Of course, I needed proof, real proof. So, I called in an expert. Her name was Eleanor Pratt, a retired historian who specialized in genealogy and property record reconstruction. She sounded intrigued the moment I mentioned the map. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "I have dealt with cases like this before. You would be surprised how often boundaries were never properly updated, especially before the Civil War. Send me everything you have." I scanned the map, the letter, the deed fragments, and sent them over. Then I waited. And waiting, when you suspect you might own 800 acres, is a special kind of torture. Meanwhile, Victoria's behavior escalated from controlling to unhinged. She started hosting community meetings every weekend, posting flyers about preserving our neighborhood's exclusivity. I even overheard her bragging to someone about an upcoming development partnership. My gut twisted again. She was selling something she did not own. So I started digging into her finances. Nothing illegal, just good old-fashioned public record searching. And there it was, a contract between her and a small development firm called Silverwood Estates LLC. The terms were simple. She promised them exclusive lake access and rights to construct a private resort. Her commission, over $1 million. She was selling the dream of control, and people were buying it. The part that chilled me most, she genuinely seemed to believe it was legitimate. Either she had lost touch with reality, or she was the boldest fraudster I had ever encountered. Maybe both. 3 weeks crawled by like 3 years. Every morning, I would wake up, check my phone, and wonder if today would be the day I got an answer from Eleanor. During that time, Victoria doubled down. Construction trucks rolled in, bulldozers, piles of gravel and pipes. When I asked the foreman for a permit, he shrugged and said, "Talk to the HOA president." That is when I knew she was trying to build her proof, physical evidence that the lake belonged to her. I started documenting everything again. Dates, photos, videos, even the sound of the engines tearing into the shoreline. By week 3, my patience was hanging by a thread. I was one phone call away from snapping. Then, that call came. Mr. Thompson. It was Eleanor, her voice trembling with excitement. "You are not going to believe this." The Thompson family deed was never properly divided. I confirmed it with county land records. The property tax divisions were administrative only, not legal. Based on the original plat, your family still holds title to approximately 800 acres. I went silent. "Mr. Thompson," she asked. "I am here," I said softly. "You were telling me I own the entire lake." "Not just the lake," she said, "everything around it, including several residential plots." I felt dizzy. I sank into a chair, staring at the wall like it might give me answers. 800 acres. That is not a backyard. That is a kingdom. And Victoria. She had been playing queen on land that was never hers to rule. That night, I poured a glass of bourbon and sat on the deck, staring out across the water that was suddenly mine. All mine. The ripples shimmered in the moonlight like they were laughing with me, or maybe at me. I did not feel victorious. I felt stunned. Because with that much power comes a question that no lawyer, no contract, no court can answer easily. What is the right thing to do? I thought about calling Victoria right then and there, telling her what I had found, just to watch her face crumble. But I did not. I knew better. She would deny it, twist it, weaponize it. Instead, I called Gary. He answered on the second ring, his voice tired. "Gary," I said, "you are not going to believe this, but I think I just inherited a legal nightmare disguised as a miracle." He chuckled weakly. "That sounds about right." I told him everything, the deed, the 800 acres, the confirmation. He did not speak for a long time. Then he whispered, "Marcus, you own her house." I laughed. Yeah, that irony is not lost on me. But jokes aside, there was something heavy sitting in my chest. I could feel it even as the lake breeze cooled my face. What do you do when you suddenly hold the power to destroy or save everyone around you? I did not have the answer. Not yet. But I knew one thing. Victoria was not going to take this lying down. And as I looked out at the calm silver water, I knew this was only the beginning. If I have learned one thing about power, it is that the moment someone realizes they are losing it, they go feral. Victoria Hayes was proof of that. Once word started leaking that something big was happening with the land, she could smell her control slipping. And when a narcissist feels cornered, they do not retreat, they detonate. 2 days after Eleanor's call, I woke up to the sound of machinery again, but this time it was not just a bulldozer or a cement mixer. It was a full construction crew, 3 trucks, a backhoe, and half a dozen men laying down concrete barriers at the lakeside entrance. They were building something that looked suspiciously like a wall. I threw on my jacket and walked straight toward them. "Who authorized this?" I shouted over the roar of the engines. The foreman glanced at his clipboard, confused. "Miss Hayes," he said. "Said it is part of the new lake management expansion. Did she show you a permit?" He shook his head. "Said it is under expedited community authority." I actually laughed, loud enough for the entire crew to hear. "Buddy, I am the community authority now. And you are standing on my land." He frowned, uncertain. "You are Mr. Thompson, right? She said you were the troublemaker." I stepped closer, my voice low and sharp. If you value your business license, you will stop pouring concrete right now and call your lawyer, because this entire project is about to become evidence in a fraud case. You could feel the shift in the air. The men exchanged glances, shut off their machines, and slowly began packing up. I watched them drive away, one truck at a time, until the only sound left was the wind rippling through the pines. Then I looked toward Victoria, his house across the lake. She was standing on her deck, phone in hand, watching everything unfold, and for the first time since I met her, she looked afraid. That afternoon, I decided it was time to take this fight public. I called for a legitimate HOA meeting, one that actually followed the bylaws. I sent certified notices to all 50 residents, outlining the agenda, review of financial discrepancies, confirmation of leadership roles, and potential misuse of HOA authority. Within hours, Victoria blasted out a message calling it a hostile coup attempt. She claimed I was trying to steal community assets. The irony was so thick I could taste it. When the day of the meeting arrived, I was not sure anyone would show, but they did. 45 people packed into the community hall. Neighbors, homeowners, even the local developer she had been working with. The tension was electric. I stood at the front, holding a stack of documents. Before we began, I said, "Everything you are about to hear is backed by public record. I am not here to destroy this community. I am here to save it from lies." Victoria sat in the front row, arms crossed, jaw tight, pretending not to listen. I started with the basics. 3 weeks ago, Miss Hayes conducted an emergency meeting that violated quorum rules and resulted in unlawful fines being issued to residents. That meeting was invalid. A few people nodded. They had been fined too. Next, I continued. Miss Hayes has been operating under false pretenses regarding lake ownership. The HOA has no legal claim over the waterway. The deed boundaries stop before the shoreline. More murmurs. Someone whispered, "Then who owns the lake?" I paused, letting the silence build. "That is the question that started all of this," I said. "And I have the answer." Victoria stood up suddenly. "This is absurd! You are lying! None of that paperwork means anything." I held up the certified deed, county seal glinting under the fluorescent light. According to official county verification, the original Thompson property, dating back to 1847, was never legally subdivided, which means the land, the water rights, and the surrounding parcels remain under that original title. The room went still. Every breath felt like it echoed off the walls. In plain English, I said, slowly, "I own the lake. I own this hall. And yes, Miss Hayes, I own the land under your house." The eruption was instant. Gasps, whispers, shouted questions. People stood up, craning their necks to see the documents. Victoria's face went ghost white, then flushed red with rage. "You liar," she screamed, voice cracking. "You forged those documents." Gary stood up from the back. "No, he did not," he said, holding up a folder. "I verified everything with the county myself. And I have something else." He walked to the front, plugged in a USB drive, and played an audio recording for everyone to hear. "Gary," Victoria's voice said through the speakers, "if you testify that Marcus violated HOA policy, I will pay you $5,000. Think of it as protecting the community, and your wife is treatment." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Gary's eyes glistened, but his voice was steady. "She tried to buy me. I recorded everything." Victoria lunged forward like she was going to rip the cord from the wall, but two men stepped between her and the projector. "That is bribery," someone shouted, "and fraud." It was chaos, people yelling, phones recording, the air charged like a courtroom moments before the verdict. I waited for the noise to die down, then spoke calmly. "There is more. Miss Hayes has been making deals with developers, selling access to land she does not own. I have copies of the contracts right here, including a $1 million commission agreement with Silverwood Estates LLC. The developer's representatives stood up, Face pale, she told us the HOA owned the lake. She lied, I said flatly. And she sold you property that legally belongs to me, and by extension, to all of you. Victoria started shouting over me, her words tumbling over each other. You cannot prove that. This is all fake. You are all conspiring against me. I built this community. I deserve respect. Her voice broke on that last word, the arrogance finally cracking to reveal desperation. I met her gaze and said quietly, "You do not build communities by destroying trust, Victoria. You build empires, and those always fall." That was the moment she snapped. She lunged forward, grabbing the stack of papers from the table and tearing them in half. "You will regret this," she screamed, throwing the pieces into the air like confetti. "I will sue every one of you." The crowd backed away as she spiraled, shouting incoherently about conspiracies, corruption, and persecution. Even her loyal supporters looked horrified. It was like watching a queen realize her crown had turned to dust. Finally, 2 deputies who had been standing near the door stepped forward. "Ma'am, that is enough," one of them said firmly. She froze, breathing hard. "You are all going to be sorry," she hissed, before storming out of the room. The door slammed behind her, the echo stretching longer than anyone expected. The silence that followed was heavy. Then someone clapped, then another, and within seconds, the room erupted in applause, not for me, but for the truth. The days that followed were chaos. The county opened an official investigation into Victoria's activities. The developer filed a fraud complaint. Residents began uncovering their own fake fines, discovering how much money she had siphoned through bogus community maintenance fees. I handed over every document, every recording, every email chain I had. It was like watching a dam break, the lies flooding out faster than anyone could contain them. But the strangest part was not her downfall. It was how the community reacted to me. Some people saw me as a hero, the guy who exposed the scam and saved their homes. Others looked at me with fear, because no matter how I phrased it, the fact remained, I now owned everything. The land beneath their feet, the water they fished in, the trails their kids played on, and that terrified them. One evening, Gary stopped by with a bottle of bourbon. He set it on my porch table without a word. After a while, he said quietly, "You could charge rent, you know. You could evict her. You could sell the whole thing for millions." "I know," I said, staring at the lake. "So what are you going to do?" That question hung in the air, like fog over the water. I did not answer right away, because I honestly did not know. I had spent my entire career fighting over ownership, rights, and leverage. But standing there, watching the sunset reflect off the lake I had once just wanted to fish in, I realized none of it meant what I thought it did. "I am going to do what she never could," I said finally. The right thing. A week later, the sheriff came knocking. Victoria Hayes had been arrested on charges of real estate fraud, bribery, and falsifying documents. The deputy showed me the warrant, my name listed as a cooperating witness. As they led her away from her house, still shouting about conspiracies, I felt no satisfaction, just closure. She had called the cops on me for fishing, and now they were taking her away from my land. The irony was poetic, but I did not smile. Because beneath the surface, I knew the fight was not over. Owning land is easy. Doing right by it, that is the hard part. And as I stood on the dock that night, the water calm and silver under the moon, I whispered the same words I had said the first day she screamed at me. This is my lake. But maybe, just maybe, it was never meant to belong to one person. The morning they took Victoria away, the lake was so still it looked like a mirror. No wind, no ripples, just silence. The kind of silence that comes after a storm, when the world feels like it is holding its breath. I stood on my deck with a cup of coffee, watching the flashing lights fade down the road. It was over. At least, that is what I thought. But endings are never clean. You cannot just arrest a person and expect the mess they left behind to vanish. The truth is, Victoria did not just build an HOA, she built a culture, a system of fear, manipulation, and silence that people had learned to accept. And tearing that down was going to take more than a court order. 2 days after her arrest, I got a call from the county prosecutor's office. "Mr. Thompson," the voice said, "we would like you to testify. You are the key witness." Key witness. Funny how life works. A few months ago, I was a man trying to fish in peace. Now, I was the center of a legal storm stretching across the entire county. When I arrived at the courthouse, Victoria was already there, sitting in the defendant's chair, pale and shaking, her trademark confidence stripped away. She looked smaller, almost fragile. When the prosecutor listed her charges, fraud, bribery, falsification of public records, conspiracy, she did not even flinch. She just stared at the table. Then they called my name. I stood, swore my oath, and told the truth. Every word, every lie she told, every fake document, every time she tried to scare someone into silence. The defense attorney tried to paint me as an opportunist, a man who suddenly discovered ownership and used it to destroy a woman's reputation, but the documents spoke louder than any argument. When I showed the original 1,847 deed, stamped and verified, the courtroom went silent. The judge leaned forward, studying the seal. "This is extraordinary," he said. "You are telling me this deed covers all current development areas around the lake?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "Ms. Hayes was selling access to land she never owned. The defense had no counter." The case was decided before the gavel even dropped. Victoria was sentenced to 3 years in state prison, plus restitution of nearly $500,000. The crowd murmured when the verdict was read. Some cheered, others cried. Me. I just stood there, feeling like I had watched something both just and tragic. Because as much as she deserved it, there was still a piece of me that pitied her. She was not evil. She was hollow, driven by greed and the illusion of power. And I knew better than anyone how easy it was to lose yourself chasing control. Life moved on, but slower than I expected. The media latched onto the story. Man discovers he owns entire lake, exposes HOA fraud. My phone blew up with calls from reporters, podcasters, even talk shows. Some painted me as a hero, others as a villain who took advantage of a broken system. I did not care about either version. I just wanted peace, the same peace I came here for in the first place. Gary helped me navigate the chaos. He had become something of a local figure himself, the man who exposed a bribery scandal and helped bring down the corrupt HOA. His wife's health was improving, and every time I saw them walking by the lake hand in hand, it reminded me why all of this mattered. One evening, he brought over 2 glasses and a bottle of bourbon. We sat by the fire pit, the water glowing gold in the sunset. "You know," he said, "you could sell this land and retire for real. 800 acres. You would never have to work again." I chuckled. "I already do not work, Gary. I am serious. Developers would line up for this. You could make millions." I stared at the lake, silent for a while. "Yeah," I said finally. "And then what?" "Watch it turn into a gated resort with private docks and no trespassing signs. Watch families get pushed out of the homes they love." He nodded slowly. "So what is the plan, counselor?" "The plan," I said, "is to do something no lawyer has ever done before. Give it away." It took months to make it official. Meetings with the county commissioner, piles of paperwork, environmental assessments, legal filings. But in the end, the deed transfer went through. 800 acres, the entire lake, donated to the county as Thompson Lake Public Recreation Area. When the news broke, people were stunned. Reporters called me the man who gave away $1 million property, but I did not see it that way. I was not giving something up, I was setting something free. The day of the dedication ceremony, the entire community showed up. Kids waved handmade signs. The local high school band played an off-key version of America the Beautiful. Even the county commissioner teared up when she spoke. Gary stood beside me, grinning like a proud brother. "You did it," he said quietly. I laughed. "We did it." Because this was not just my victory, it was redemption for everyone Victoria had hurt. Years passed, the lake transformed. What used to be a place of tension became a gathering spot for families, boaters, and weekend campers. Thompson Lake Day became an annual festival, fishing tournaments, live music, fireworks over the water. Property values went up, not down, because people wanted to live near a community built on trust instead of fear. And Gary, well, he became the new HOA president, but not the old kind, transparent. Fair. Every meeting recorded and shared online. Every budget vote open to residents. His motto was simple: no secrets, no power trips, no more Victorias. His wife fully recovered. They started a non-profit helping families fight HOA abuse. And every time he spoke at a conference or on the news, he ended with the same line: sometimes the law cannot protect you, but the truth can. Then, one quiet afternoon, about 3 years after Victoria's sentencing, I got a letter. No return address. Inside was a single piece of paper with shaky handwriting. I do not expect forgiveness. I just want to say thank you for stopping me before I destroyed more lives. I have been working with the Prison is Literacy program, helping other inmates earn their GEDs. Maybe that is my version of fixing what I broke. VH. I sat there for a long time, reading those words over and over. I did not know whether to feel peace or sadness, maybe both. A few months later, she was granted parole. One Saturday morning, I saw her, sitting quietly on a bench near the dock. No makeup, no fake confidence, just a tired woman staring at the water she once tried to own. For a moment, I thought about walking over, but I did not. I just gave her a nod. She nodded back. And somehow, that was enough. People still tell the story, of course. It has become local legend. The lawyer who owned the lake. Kids ask their parents, did that really happen? And every time I hear laughter echo across the water, I think about how close this place came to being destroyed by greed. Now, it is alive, free, open. And every morning, I still wake up early, make my coffee, and cast a line into the same water where it all began. The difference is, I am never really alone anymore. Families walk by, kids ride bikes along the trail, dogs splash in the shallows. The sound of life fills the air. Sometimes, a stranger recognizes me. Hey, are not you the guy from the news? The lawyer who fought the HOA. I smile. No, I tell them. I am just a guy who likes to fish. Last week, I was sitting on the dock when a little girl walked up holding a pink fishing rod. Mister, she said, my dad says you saved the lake. Is that true? I smiled and looked out at the water. No, sweetheart, I said softly. The lake saved us. The sun dipped low, painting the world in gold, and I realized something. All those years in courtrooms, all those battles for ownership and control, they had never given me peace, but giving this place back did. Now, when people ask what I learned from all this, I tell them the truth. Power is not about what you own, it is about what you protect. Justice is not always served in courtrooms, it is served when people stand up for what is right, even when no one is watching. And peace. Peace comes when you stop fighting to keep everything and start learning to let go. So here I am, 5 years later, watching the lake shimmer under the setting sun. The water carries reflections of kids, laughter, and the quiet rhythm of a world that finally feels right. I sip my coffee, feel the cool breeze against my face, and whisper the words that started it all, only this time they mean something entirely different. This is my lake. Then I smile and add, ours now.